Stephen had an interesting life. It could have been, he could have written a book. There could have been a movie, an exciting movie made about him. Because there were so many facets of his life. I don't want to forget some of this. I'm trying to go through the whole life very briefly, but I do have to remember some of the things that went on. Now, when I do remember his last year of high school, he went to an alternative high school in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and on weekends he would come and stay with our family in San Jose. After that, an important part of his life was when he lived and worked in the rainforest, in the Olympic Range in Washington State. Now, the most important part of Stephen's life is, of course, the years he spent with Lana. Now, sadly, it wasn't terribly long after they were married, Lana came down with leukemia. After that, Stephen's, all of his energies at work and at home concentrated on taking care of Lana. And Paul will remember that his self-sacrifice and the devotion that he gave for Lana were really, they truly were heroic. Let's see, that I think is the main thing, and we won't, none of us can ever, I think, forget.
The doctors gave her 4 years, and he gave her like 24.
I'm sorry.
He helped her live 22 more years.
She said the doctors gave her 4 initially, remember? And she ended up living 20 more or whatever.
Not mine.
He just gave,
It's unbelievable.
Not my dog. I know, it's hers. Oh, it's hers.
He about killed himself to save her
yes,
at
he
the
did.
time.
Yes, he did. He did. He worked so hard. Yes, his health deteriorated. Well, all of those years, I kept in touch with Stephen occasionally with visits, and then we would have regular, long telephone conversations. So life isn't going to be the same now without Stephen. Now, I don't want to say too much more. I think I've covered the main things here, and I know some of you will want to share your thoughts, your memories, and so Suzanne, we will start with Suzanne.
We had a reading. Christine was going to give a reading.
I'm sorry.
Did we want to do that first?
Yes, that was supposed to be first.
We just had, a little reading that we found that we thought was really appropriate. This one, it's called His Journey's Just Begun. Don't think of him as gone away. His journey's just begun. Life holds so many facets. This earth is only one. Think how he must be wishing that we could know today how nothing but our sadness can really pass away. Think of him as living in the hearts of those he touched. For nothing loved is ever lost, and he was loved so much.
It's beautiful.
Suzanne was Stephen's age.
I was just a couple of years, almost a couple of years younger than his older sister, and just a little less than 1 year older than him. So I was in between those two cousins. And my first memories of Stephen, I'm just going to give impressions through the years and try to throw in some highlights and a few little stories, a few things, but kind of based on my impressions and my senses of things. My first impression, I remember as a really little one myself, so Stephen was littler even, going to when his family was still here and started in California, after World War II. Bill and his family were in the Sacramento area. Dad and us, we were in the San Francisco Bay Area. We lived in South San Francisco. Now, if any of you know South City, you know it's about as foggy as San Francisco. We got the same kind of Daly City, San Francisco stuff. So when we went to Sacramento, I remember as a little one, all I could think of was how sunny this place is. Sacramento was sunny and bright, and they had a little 2-story with a porch and the stairs, and it was so different than the houses I had lived in, and the sunniness. I just remember sunniness. So my first impression, Bill and Mary Jane and Kathy and Steve, what a sunny and bright family and life they had, just from that aspect. As a little one, that's the first impression I had of them all. Then of course they went from that to Hawaii. So I learned a new word before I was 10, tropical. And we got Christmas presents, you know, from them, and saw pictures of them in front of their tree, which had tinsel on it. Tinsel, what was that? With our 5 little ones, we didn't have tinsel on the tree, we just had ornaments. So even photos with tinsel, black and white photos with tinsel was a big deal even. How, you know, exciting even just that little aspect. And them with their bikes, well, we were getting our bikes. And of course we didn't see them off on the boat there, but we heard story that when they crossed on the ocean liner to Hawaii, it was Easter time apparently. And Mary Jane, the mother, not wanting her children to miss the Easter egg hunt for Easter time, traveled with prepared eggs and little decorations and all, and set things up in the cabin, wherever else. And those 2 kids had an Easter egg hunt on an ocean liner on their way to Hawaii for Bill's next assignment with the Navy, you know, the career Navy man. Also very, you know, very impressionable here, you know, I thought that was also neat. Next thing is they moved to Washington, D.C. And about that time, our little family, Dad was a teacher. He stopped working in the classroom and went to take a teacher's association job, and we lived in Albuquerque, even though a lot of his work when he wasn't in Albuquerque was in Santa Fe, a lot of government stuff. 2 years of that was enough, we came back to California. But while we were in Albuquerque doing our thing, and Dad even traveling for conferences all around the country, and that was pretty exciting. To and from the airport, dropping him off, picking him up, getting little booklets, you know, for like souvenir things, and we could learn about the country. Again, I'm learning as much from Stephen and his family because they're in DC and they're going to New York City and they're doing all that East Coast stuff. So again, my world expanded as Stephen and his family, as their travels expanded. And I remember thinking again how exciting that was for him. And yet there came a point, because Dad had his like long weekend, you know, conference or maybe full week travels, and I learned about Bill going to a flight school in Arkansas and having to leave his family in DC for like 3 or 6 months. And again, as you know, I'm 10 to 12 in these years, and as a young person, but with enough more knowledge of the world and family life and missing a parent, I thought how lonely and kind of how sad that was. Gee, they're gone for so long. And then of course, Bill spent that time in Antarctica with that research station, you know, commanding that thing down there. And we would get pictures of Bill with icicles hanging from his eyelashes.
Wow.
And again, talk about, you know, foreign lands and the ends of the earth and all. And I thought of Stephen too, and again, kind of, you know, how wonderful and how exciting and how proud he must be, but a little bit lonely again. But when Bill, on some exploratory flight around some area, discovered a new mountain range and was told he could name it, and so there's now an Everett mountain range somewhere in Antarctica, even though we know it was named mostly for his mother and him and his brother. The rest of us felt included, and not too many people can say there's a mountain range anywhere named after the family. So with Stephen, for the excitement and a little bit of loneliness, a lot of pride too, and we felt it extended to us too. So then my next impression, of course, they moved to Japan. And this time we were there. We were back in California from Albuquerque. We were there in San Francisco to see them off the docks, and that was my first time on, you know, a big ship like that. And the call, everybody has to get off, and I'm thinking, oh no, I want to stay, I want to go to Japan too. But they had their great trip, and that was very exotic, I thought. A little dangerous, you know, that whole Eastern world and all, but very exciting. And Stephen went through his adolescence there while we did ours here. And of course the world was a dangerous place there, because like Mom pointed out, when Bill was in charge of all the operations above, on, and below the Pacific Ocean, that's when the Pueblo was taken by North Korea. I don't know if any of you remember the USS Pueblo incident back in the 60s. And that was a big deal. And when Commander Booker and all the men had been released, there were trials and things here to find out like what went wrong. Well, Bill and his position, even though the admirals were the names always in the newspapers because we followed all those articles, Bill was the operational guy. And he used to have to travel to D.C. and even I think there were trials in Kansas and all, Leavenworth, with a briefcase with the important papers, handcuffed to his wrist. This was a big time. So again, I'm learning a lot more about the world than maybe I would have paid attention to otherwise. You know, all of this exoticness and yet dangerousness. And then Stephen came back to California. Things were tough in Japan. It was time for him to finish high school and maybe he'd be more successful doing that here. So he came to our south part of the Bay Area, and Mom and Dad were very helpful helping find a school, and he spent weekends with us, even though the middle of the weeks he was at this progressive school, you know, in the hills, and I thought that was also very exciting. Very exciting.
Oh yeah.
It was more a hippie type school than a progressive school even. They made beer in chemistry class and other things that were going on in the 60s, which this one doesn't want me to mention. It was very exciting and exotic, even on the homeland.
Ignorance is
Even on
bliss.
the homelands, I was learning all kinds of stuff I shouldn't have been knowing about yet, you know, from my younger cousin. But moving on from that. Oh, and one interesting thing, again, if you folks remember Buckminster Fuller, the creator of the Geodesic Dome, he was on that campus. Stephen used to walk around with Bucky, you know, and they built a dome as one of their projects for some little class. So it really was an interesting and an exciting time. And again, my world horizons continued to expand. After that, Stephen moved to Washington, and he lived in a teepee in the Hoh rainforest in the Olympic mountain range there, doing his lumbering and, you know, chopping wood and doing whatever was, you know, the right thing to do, of course, and then he had his other projects too. And I thought that I was really pleased about that. And in fact, during those years were the years that I was also finishing high school and getting a little bit of college and moving out. And I thought this was just perfect. This was perfect for him. He seemed to have found himself. He seemed to have found his place in the world. You know, him in that teepee, you know, and that's when the hair really grew. It was like he was home. Finally, really, he found and made his own home, and that was really neat for me to see too. And I need my water just for a minute. Thanks. Okay, and now during these years, to me, he's Raven. And I went right with that because that fit. He was Raven, he had huevos, you know, his big white German Shepherd. He was everything. Those were just the years. Now, I lived on my own. Well, I lived with a lot of roommates. In Campbell, California, near Los Gatos, just the other side of the mountains from Santa Cruz, you know, 17 and all. And it was 3/4 of an acre. So it wasn't like a hippie commune, but we had a lot of roommates. We had a lot of people coming and going visiting. We had, besides the main little house, we had farm buildings and barns and workshops, and we grew a vegetable garden, almost half an acre. Those were some fun years for me. I was learning a lot on my own, but always to be outdone by Stephen. He's always, you know, a couple of steps ahead of me. So he would come and visit, and he'd stay at my place, you know, going to and from, because now he's done in Washington. He's kind of trying to set roots here. And every now and then I would take him when he needed a ride and some help. And I always loved traveling with him because he always had his stories, and he really was an interesting person to be around, no matter the circumstance. But I remember taking him when he needed to Grass Valley, you know, up in the Gold Country, and he would get these vitamin B shots because all that work in the Hoh rainforest, he suffered some injuries and he needed some help here and there. So he'd go for his vitamin B shots, and those days we had all heard about Elvis's Dr. Feelgood. He called his friend / doctor up there his Dr. Feelgood, so I take him to his Dr. Feelgood. He'd get his vitamin B shots, you know. And sometimes we'd go into the Santa Cruz Mountains, and he was working on buying some property in Boulder Creek area. So I have friends in that area. So again, this, you know, our worlds were kind of expanding into the same parts of the world, geographically at least, you know, and all of that. And again, it was just really fun in and out of the mountains with him. And I remember the one time I dropped him off with his friend Dr. Pat. I don't know if any of you heard of this, but Dr. Pat was a healer. And again, I don't know in terms exactly what the doctor meant, but Dr. Pat was a healer, and she had connections with the Dalai Lama. And I remember Stephen being so proud. You know, Raven at the time, but I'm back to calling him Stephen, obviously. So, but Raven at the time, he talked about taking a toothbrush and cleaning the tiles on the front stoop. And one room was going to be dedicated to the Dalai Lama while he visited and stayed. And he cleaned, again, like that with the toothbrush, the floors, the walls, the ceiling, in preparation for the Dalai Lama's visit. And I, you know, unfortunately, I couldn't wheedle any way in with Stephen's connections because even he apparently didn't get to see or meet the Dalai Lama. But we all felt the connection, just his involvement that way, and that was pretty special too. And then after that, after a number of years, you know, him in and out of my place and in and out with huevos of my car and all our little travels up to Grass Valley and around Santa Cruz, all of a sudden Stephen just fell off the mat for us. We didn't see him for years. 2, 3, 5, a lot of years. And it was troubling and it was a little worrisome, and I didn't know to be scared for him until after the fact. But whatever he all went through, and apparently there's a story in Life magazine that talks about it that none of us have seen, but again, we're not supposed to talk about that right now. So whatever went on, he came back to us, and we were all so relieved. Stephen back in our lives in California, and this time the emotion that I had, separate from the happy, normal homecoming and welcoming when he came back to California from Washington. This time when he returned to California for good, it was beyond happy and homecoming. Stephen came back fulfilled because he came back with Lana. And I'm going to stop my story at that point, you know, and we can talk more, of course, in the restaurant and all. But that, he came back, he had Lana, they had all their things, they had all of you too. But that's where I'll stop my little extra story. And I just want to say I'm going to miss him in the car or in his home, in a restaurant, you know, tootling the world. I'm going to miss Stephen and his adventures because part of my world has stopped expanding at this point with the loss of him. I'm still doing my part, but it's not the same.
Now, when we go to the restaurant, we do have pictures. We're going to try to get a table and just set out a bunch of pictures so you can see his life from an infant, you know, up until this last one that Maria just brought us, so we took in February. Okay. Anybody else? We'd love to hear.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your
because
stories.
you know these last several years, of course, we just saw him occasionally. We'd love to hear from any of you.
Well, I might as well say something because he came to the front of my house, see, and he looks a little bit like me, right? So that's some of why I'm here, obviously. But the thing was, everything you said is so mind-blowing, see, because I have an invention that stops sea rise, has to do with the Arctic.
Yes.
No kidding. So I'm completely blown to find all this out. This is so cool. And past that, you know, I don't want to grandstand, you know what I mean? I kind of want to just blend in a little bit and get to, like, of course, I want to know the things that we're not supposed to know in the magazine. What the hell, baby? Yeah.
We do too.
But other than that, you know, whatever, we're going to go to lunch, so it's like, yay!
We've just heard a few key words that are scary, but we don't know anything either.
Not real.
Yeah.
Right. So, man,
A
I'm
few
so glad to the detail
Yeah.
between the two of you. This was more detail than I would have hoped for. So I'm like,
Well, we didn't want to
Thank
do too
you.
much. We don't want to bore you,
Hell
but we
cool.
want to
Not boring.
You know this? I'm going to say something if I can.
No.
a lot of
No.
detail. I was happy.
You couldn't say that about Stephen. And I'm glad our talking about it wasn't even that different.
Now, Maria must have something to say.
If you can.
I was gonna write a happy wake song and keep it really on the happy.
She was going to bring her guitar, and I
My
asked her,
guitar.
"Where's your guitar?"
And I'm so happy you guys talked because I don't know if I can.
Already.
I know.
You're
I'll go by and set up on
And we'll do that as
What's that? I know.
Oh my God.
It's like that too. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Anyways, I'm so grateful and
Anybody
appreciative
else?
for you guys all
Oh
coming.
yes, over here. We have
Thank
something.
you. Lou was so worried that I was going to be the only one in this week. No way.
No.
And I know he's looking down and he's so happy.
And the eagle
We hope
feathers
so.
to come.
We hope
I
so.
left it at home. No,
Oh,
my
awesome.
Yes,
Oh, perfect.
and we talked about that already. I said,
Cool.
oh, somebody brought a feather. My eagle feather
That's the
is
best
all
thing you
together.
could have brought.
When we come to make our first visit,
Yeah.
this is all done, you know. I'll bring it and leave it
Yes,
there.
somebody else.
Oh,
I
yeah.
know.
Perfect. That's the most perfect, appropriate thing you could have brought.
Yes.
Richard,
We want to
My name is Richard and this is Susan. We live next door to called Loo.
Yes, go ahead.
Or she would say lunatic.
yes. You see why we refuse to go.
We called him Stephen once and he didn't like
He
that.
was right off the edge when I called him Steve.
He was hoping really.
He told me that I
It's
could
not
call
really
him.
from us.
Oh yeah, he accepted it. He knew I'm stubborn, you know. And
When he
I-
went from Raven to Luke, he said, okay, it stops there for us.
I didn't even go to Raven.
We're
And I
not gonna
said,
change
no,
every
for
other
me
year.
or Stephen, and he said, okay. I'll be
So being next door, he was Lou in front of my house.
Yeah,
He was
yeah.
just, he loved me.
So that was the last one, I guess.
Yeah, I think Lou's the last name. Richard.
And I'm an army
So
brat, and I'm
being
traveling.
right next door, close quarters, we were quite informed about all current events,
Oh, yes.
which sometimes were intertwined with other things, and he had great stories to tell when he visited, and I want to thank him for improving my listening skills. Because as you all know, when he started a story, he covered it pretty much in detail, but made it real for the person he was talking with. It was very interesting, and I'll miss that.
Well, you know, I mentioned those long telephone conversations, so I knew.
There you go.
Yes, yes.
He was a good neighbor.
Good.
That's good. That's nice to hear.
Well, I was also a neighbor across the street, slightly east, and he moved in, bought our place in 2015, and it took a year or so before we actually moved in, but my memories of, he said Luke, but we also called him Lou, just kindness, such a kind person. He came over and he wanted to know if he could give me something, you know, for my garden, because I have a garden, and well, I was making a garden at the time. I now have a garden, and just such a kind person, and I mean, obviously his death was an absolute shock to me,
Yes.
and I still miss him. I mean, it's one of those classic examples. You don't know what it's like when somebody, you don't know what it's like until they're gone. But one of the little things he did give me, because we had like a Buddhist connection, and it's actually a Dalai Lama story. He had some little memento that he wanted to give me. It was interesting. He used to me about 6 months ago, and he wanted to give it to me because he wanted it to be safe, and he wanted to go to the right hands. And he told me the story of the Dalai Lama and how he was visiting, but he met the Dalai Lama's brother, and the Dalai Lama brother gave him this little crystal, which I brought with me.
Yes.
And it's just a little pyramid, but it's just I wanted to bring it in honor. So yeah.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So
He's going to take me over to
yeah.
look at this.
Thank you, my dear.
So much love. So much love.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. And my husband, he would be here today, but he's actually on a retreat, so on a long retreat in Massachusetts. But anyway, so and thank you for your stories. It's so, I mean, wow, what a being. So yeah.
Well, I guess I can
Yes.
share a quick story.
Yes.
You know, I moved up here from Oakland in about 2003. My dad bought the gas station, Bridgeway Gas. You see a lot of familiar faces here. But I used to see Luke on a daily basis. You know, when he initially bought the gas station, he would come in just about every day, and he was always an interesting man. He'd always sit around and tell me these really awesome stories. You know. And God, I remember, sometimes he'd smell like pot coming in. And one day I was like, "Hey, Luke, you got any of that stuff? You know, I'm having a long, stressful day." And he looked at his eyes lit up, and he said, "Yeah, sure, come on by." So we sat there all night, and we tried to solve all the problems of the world, you know. And, but I think he spent like the whole 15 years I've known him trying to figure me out, because I think it was a few months later, you know, I was with Great Fire for 10 years, and he saw me with the fire department, and then he's like, "You're on the fire department?" I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Do all the firefighters smoke pot?" I'm like, "No, no, Luke, I think it was just me." But we've had some really, really long, interesting conversations, and he was just a really kind man, and I a lot of times didn't have time to sit there and talk with people, especially people that wanted to talk a lot, but I wanted to hear everything that he had to say. And we shared so many fascinating stories. But one thing, about Luke is, I felt his heart always from the beginning. He had a really big heart, and he cared about a lot of people. And there was people that took advantage of his kindness, unfortunately. And but he was always quick to help, and always quick to give. And you don't meet people like that anymore all the time. You know what I mean? But I was really
say something with what you're saying here, because he was in front of my house, and then we got to be insanely close really quick.
Yeah.
Because of how his mind is and how my mind is, and
Sure.
mine's kind of weird too. So what happened was he was sick. And I could tell because I'm a PhD in a bunch of subjects.
Awesome.
And I'm looking at him and I'm going, "How you feel?" Because he didn't look good. His skin color was wrong, and I'm a heart-lung machine operator and research surgeon. I'm looking at him like, "Dude, when?" And I was actually on him like, "When are you going to get a blood pressure? What's your blood pressure?"
Yeah.
And everything.
Sure.
And then I wanted to say to you all, I had another friend who was equally like that, who was kind of a PhD in biochemistry, who became a carpenter, and he lived out in Bodega Bay. Okay? Well, he was kind of the same spot as Lou in his head about the medical establishment.
Sure.
So what happened with Lou in front of my house is Lou was sick.
Yeah.
And he was afraid to go in because the thing's so fucked up.
Yeah.
He didn't want to go in and deal with them.
Yeah.
I say that to you.
Yeah, sure.
That we have to have a community where we avoid error so we don't lose.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the only name I know off of them, but all these other names are spectacular.
Oh, yeah.
But what I'm saying is he didn't go in. So that guy out there got pneumonia. By the time he got in, they couldn't save him. His wife had a funeral. I was super manic. She wouldn't even let me to the funeral, but they gave me his T-shirt because I worked with him for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Not a T-shirt, it was a real nice shirt. I almost wore it. So I wore this, which I wore in Guatemala because of the peyote, because of Lou. And I brought the best weed I had so we could all smoke it with us. And I actually cut it down. I didn't know how many would be, and I said I shouldn't have cut it down. I'll end there.
That brings me back to Raven. He used to
Straight
carry a
up
little
at you.
pouch.
Yeah,
you with your gym. Women loved him, always. And he carried a little pouch.
Yeah.
There's always some green, mushrooms,
Yeah.
other grains, and gemstones.
And he was so
Women gave
spiritual.
him
And
loose gemstones.
Yeah.
He had the most interesting little pouch, little leather pouch.
he sure did.
Back to you, but those
Yeah.
two stories just make me think, oh yes,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
my Raven. That
Yeah,
is
what-
my Stephen.
We always had just so much to share things like that because I grew up spiritual and I was blessed that my parents gave me the freedom to believe in what I wanted to, but the spirituality him and I shared was huge. And for the past few years now, I start emergency response systems in underprivileged countries, but I got the pleasure of going to Nepal And so that's why he kept trying to figure me out. He's like, you know, you smoke pot, you're a firefighter, you know, I've got a whole biker community that I ride with, and he's like, oh my God, yeah, you know, and
Like
then,
that, I'm sure.
and then,
You know
yeah,
about the
you know,
guys in
and he,
Russia?
oh, he was so fascinated. And then when that show Sons of Anarchy came out, he had so many questions. I'm like, look, it's just a show. Those things don't really happen. And he's like, yeah, right. You know, you just don't want to talk about it. You know better. And I'm like, no, really.
That's
you
Sonny
know?
Barker's world that was
Yeah.
on TV. Yeah, that goes back.
Yeah,
the old
speaking of that,
Los
Sonny's
Angeles
birthday
days.
Sunday that we're going to, and yeah, I'll be thinking about because I've showed him many pictures, you know. Anyway, so I had a lot to share with him about Nepal and the Buddhist community there. But we just had great conversations, and when you talk to him, and I'm sure everyone can agree, he talks from his heart. You can feel his energy. You know what I mean? And although he had struggles and you would catch him being depressed here and there, you can always feel his heart with. It was always exploding with, full of life and love. You know.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Anybody else?
yeah, that's about it.
Lou touched my heart. I live in a complex, and a couple of months ago I went to pick the lemons out on our street, across the street, and I shut my engine off. Well, I shouldn't shut the engine off. I think I grabbed a couple of lemons and take off. Well, here comes Lou. He says, Lucy, I just had some mushrooms. I said, hi. He says, oh my God, whatever. So anyway, we ended up talking for an hour. I'm glad I shut my engine off because usually when I see him, I say, oh boy, I better just not let that gas be in the air.
You were both talking for an hour?
Yeah. Well, I talked 10 minutes maybe.
I thought maybe you were special.
Oh, well, I got a
my
few
level.
words in edgewise. Let's put it that way, yeah. Anyway, I loved Rick, and he was one of a kind. I will
Yeah,
miss him.
for sure.
Now, any of you, Colin?
I'll talk
Sure.
to him.
I'll talk a little.
Okay, good.
I'm a
good.
neighbor.
Yeah.
Right across the street.
It says here.
And we had a great relationship. He was he was really a nice man, just kind and also very complimentary. Yes, I guess he appreciated women. But not in a degrading way, a very complimentary way. I mean, who doesn't like a compliment? And so that was always nice. And I was in his house before. Saw he was so into his antiques, and he didn't know quite what to do with them. But he certainly had a house full of antiques, and he knew about them. He knew they were valuable, and he didn't take them lightly. And he was a talker, and I would have to cut him off because I had things I needed to do in my house. Let's say, or I was on my way to gardening or doing something constructive. And
Our conversations, our telephone conversations, I could do some chores and he wouldn't have known the difference back when we were still.
good for you. I wasn't good at
It could
that
be
one.
that way if we chose.
I was
that.
outside, so he caught me. Anyway, he's missed. I really miss him. Absolutely.
The thing I was going to say is in the paper it says researchers are in psilocybin for medical use. In today's paper. This is him.
Yeah,
It
I
is.
believe it.
It is.
Well,
It's
even
him.
other
Huh?
even other medications, even other things like MD,
Yeah,
MDA,
but
other
then it's
drugs.
this and it's him right here, man. Because he certainly was for that.
Yeah,
He was.
Yeah, sure.
yeah, good.
All right, my turn. I'm Paul.
What's
Everybody
up,
calls
Paul?
me Space. I met Luke right when Lana was in the end of her life, I would say. He was trying to get me a guy's head selling tie-dyes in Forestville there, and he'd come by and we'd talk for a while. And then he got Lana a really nice dress. He was trying to get me to go over and see her, and he's like, well, I just got her a hospital bed and she's in the living room. I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's appropriate. But missed that one, meeting her for that, and I feel bad in a way, but I feel good that I didn't step on nobody. Like, I didn't know how she would feel about it. But then when she did pass, I guess I sort of stepped in because I started going over there and catching him on the couch and not really taking care of himself. I'd have to drive down from past Jenner to come bring him a burrito every day or so and poke him around and say, "No, you got to go forward and move on." And so that was the beginning. And so I've been with him pretty much since for a lot of years. Spent a lot of time with him. Did a lot of telephone calls. He would talk. We would talk. I would count the minutes like it would be like an hour and a half, and I was like, I haven't said a word. But it would vortex things, so I guess I was his pressure relief vent thing. So he sometimes he'd say the same thing about growing up and putting body parts in bags with Mother Hubbard, and that sort of messed him up when he went to the military, I think.
13 years old.
And so that's what made him end up in the rainforest with huevos doing the cedar stuff. And then the greater times is when he met Lana, and they started having a few good years together and got married, and then leukemia, and that's where he came in and took a lot of really good care of her. A lot of hard extra work above and beyond. For her dying in his arms, I was just like, wow, it was just really beautiful, just the way he describes. Well, she died in my hands, and I was just right there with her, and a few other things before that, and I was like, that's really cool, and that's what attracted me to him. And we were on the same level of psychedelics and the pot thing. So we were like brothers. It was like meeting a brother of mine that I never knew until now. And spent a lot of time with him throughout the years. Then he started going bad, and we started taking each other to the doctors and coaxing each other through the doors.
Wow.
And get in the car, and then sometimes we would actually be quiet. Then we would talk about it. Then we'd vent, and then we'd keep going. And so that was a lot of time I spent with him, I feel like. And then we did a few grows together because he needed something to do. So I was like, well, let's grow some weed. And that turned out to be some serious projects for several years. We did the best we could and tried to keep it.
He was so proud of that garden.
Yeah, no, we kept it under a limit, and we kept it as maintained as we could, and we had problems, and it just kept us going. Didn't really profit from it, I don't think, but kept us going. And then after the last few times with his surgical procedures, he got really mad at the doctors for giving him some chemo or something. And that was about the beginning of his end. And he just really went through it the last year. And to the point where, we talked, I guess he calls it ideations, and we talked about suicide a lot. I didn't like it when he talked like that, so I'd let him talk like that, and then we'd vent it out, and it's like, okay, you're gonna go eat and drink now, right? I'm gonna go get you some juice. You need some food, and I'd go get him food and come over and make sure that he was out of that circle and still there. And but at the end, after the last operations and what he went through, I started really feeling for him, and I didn't know what to do. I sort of tried to be a caretaker and a really good brother and a really good friend for him for all those years.
You were.
And at the end,
really,
it was really hard because he came full circle of like, there's nothing more I can do, and I'm not going back. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know what to do. So I feel much happier for him now because I saw him in pain. I don't wish that for nobody. So I know he's with Lana, and I know how much. From the day she died, he was completely heartbroken. He could barely walk for like a year. And he never moved her stuff. He never touched anything of hers. And that sort of freaked me out because that's the first thing you're supposed to do. Every time I tried to do things with him like that, it never got done. We tried to do a bunch of things to his house, and some things worked out and some things didn't, and I was like, well, I guess that's just the way it's supposed to be.
Or gonna be.
It was.
Supposed to or not gonna be, yeah.
And so I just want to say, you know, I'm really glad that you got to live and you got to do incredible amounts of things. I pretty much know what y'all said about him and then some. Because he told me a few more things that I guess I'm not supposed to say.
I'll wait till the restaurant. We'll get together.
But no, it was all good. And I'm just really happy that he's with Lana, because that's where he wanted to be from the time she had passed. And he didn't commit suicide. And we talked through all that through all those years, which is really wonderful. And he made it, and I'm just really happy for him to be here with Lana now.
Well, it sounds like you were the right person to be with him at the right time.
We spent some good time. We had some good times.
I have even more appreciation for you
he told
now.
me that Paul called every day, because I'd say, now, how is Paul doing? And he'd say, Paul calls every day.
Paul or go over, yeah, I went there every day. Go get his food, we go to the doctor.
The significance is so much deeper even we didn't realize. Thank you even more for your friendship.
It was all good. It was a good brother to meet, and like, okay. So it's good. It's hard missing him. I miss him.
Sure.
I mean, I think I call him still.
Yeah, sure.
Well, now I just call him up there, and I hope you're doing all right, Alana.
Yeah,
We all love you down here.
Now, how many of you plan to be at the restroom? Wait, one?
I might not be able to stay long.
Okay, one. I see 2 hands back there. 2, 3. You? No?
Momentarily, yeah.
Okay.
Gotta go back to work.
5.
I have to get back to work.
Oh,
Sorry.
6, 7.
Who can go to the
8.
restaurant?
No.
Yeah, I'm gonna go.
You'll be there.
You're gonna go,
9.
right?
You folks won't be there. Will you be there? 10. 4 of us. Okay. Because we have reservations for 16 of us. So you're all welcome. And as I say, we'll have pictures there. And you know, anymore. Maria says she's.
But now that I see these 2 aren't going to be there, who are you? And can you share some of your
Dan,
Stephen?
and I knew Stephen as Luke.
Luke, okay.
And I work in alternative healthcare, so I worked with Luke and Lana for several years. And my experience of him was a little bit different because I found him to be an exceptionally good listener. And I'm finding myself now wishing that I'd spent more time listening instead of talking. But when you work with alternative healthcare, you find often that people really don't understand how it's a different approach for medicine. They don't understand the types of medicines and things that you use. But I found that Luke was very smart, very resourceful.
Yes.
Both of them, they understood everything completely and really made it work. And as far as being resourceful goes, the thing that stands out most in my mind is when Luke told me that he was making $30,000 a year selling cannabis to the Catholic Church. Oh, I wish I could say that. But I guess they use it with AIDS clinics or things like that. But
he loved that one. He loved
the
irony of that one.
A helicopter was flying over their house with a big spotlight one night. And I said, well, what's that about? He says, oh, it's probably the DEA. You know, I'm growing pot back here. And he said, I sell it to the Catholic Church.
We stared at those guys a few times. We waved at them.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like, are you coming over?
And pointed to all the paperwork on the fence.
Sure did.
Well, of course, that was all legal.
It was all legal.
He had all the permits.
He did everything correct.
When we would come to visit, see, I'm a teetotaler. None of that stuff. I'm very, you know. And so when we would come to visit, he would love to shop me. And he would say, Laura, I want to show you my garden. So I would have to go out and he would show me his garden. And I'd say, oh, yeah, and he would just, you know, and I knew he was just having fun with me.
Oh, it was great.
But anyway, he made it a point to let me see every time his garden.
With our permits.
Oh yeah, and he showed me the permits because he knew if he didn't have a permit, I would say something. I usually say something anyway, but with the permit, okay, he showed. All right, keep my mouth shut.
Maria, I wanted to ask you,
Did Ed send any message on?
Yeah, he's here in spirit.
Because you've been in touch with Ed. Ed was his.
Oh,
we knew Ed.
I'm so sorry that Ed isn't here. Ed is the one. Paul,
yeah.
I
down in
I had
Mexico
seen
now.
you at Lana's service, and then Ed we had met. I think the rest of you, I've met you later, but the rest of you I had not met. And Ed, I really felt more of a connection, and I was sorry that he wasn't here, to be with us today.
He's
But
married.
Maria said she got in touch with me.
That's
right
why he's
away.
not back here.
And
Terry, his friend.
and let him know right away.
Yeah.
Now the other thing, I don't know, I think you must all
Thank
know.
you.
Stephen does have a 95-year-old mother who is still alive. She's in Missouri with very, very serious Alzheimer's. She hasn't known Stephen for years. She hasn't known anybody for years. And that's where the Martha, whoever thought I was Martha.
I'm sorry.
No, that's where
The
Martha
Finleys.
comes in, because Martha takes care of the mother and her business, and Stephen was not happy with that arrangement. So, anyway, but so there is, out of the 4 of them, there is one Everett left, and that's mother, 95 years old.
He wanted me to drive him to Missouri.
He asked you to do
Yeah,
that.
he asked me to drive him to Missouri, and I said, I don't think I can do that.
I don't think I can.
Too old to drive that far.
Buy him a plane ticket.
That's it.
Okay, anybody else? Otherwise, we'll go to the restaurant.
Real bad.
Did you guys want to
Oh, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting. We do have.
No, they have something cool.
Do we have a reservation there? Or?
Do you have?
For 12, but they'll take us
16. We have reservations for 16.
But at 1?
They're nice people.
1 o'clock. Oh, 1 o'clock.
Yeah,
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
Yeah, they'll hold it for
Did
us.
you folks? Oh, you.
I didn't know him that well. I met him through Maria because I was helping Maria when she was having her issue with her living space. But he loved my dog, and my dog loved.
He loved dogs.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
So I have his little Taco Bell dog because Maggie looks like Taco Bell dog.
Your dog, Maggie?
And then my dad was in the service, and his dad. So we had a lot to listen about. Me and Maggie.
Yeah.
Yes.
We loved a lot of things.
We had a lot to listen
Women, dogs, a whole assortment of things we won't mention.
And we had a lot of things
loved a
in
lot of
common.
things, a lot of people.
The service stuff too. So and that is the thing that I've heard from everybody, and it stands out is yes, he was one of the kindest, most compassionate men I have ever met. Really, he really cared seriously about people, and taking Maria under his wing, So that's it.
I met him through Maria too, but I'd known about him for years.
I had an aside about the Alzheimer's.
Yes.
Because I happen to have found this stuff that's cheap called cleoquinol. If you put it on the arm of an Alzheimer's patient who absolutely doesn't know you and was your dad, in 9 days he's out the back porch of the place over here, and I put dope in the end of his cigarette, and he looks over at me and says, "Thanks for saving me, Joe." Right. So I have a tube of that cream in my fridge, or if I don't, there's some in an envelope in Richard's place in Petaluma. But we'll see. I believe the lady that doesn't know anybody is reversible. Wow. And also, with this, it appears that Alzheimer's doesn't actually bury the circuitry of all our memories, it covers it up.
Yes,
so if
it's
you
coated.
strip it, you're there again, which is real cool.
Yeah, we're getting
I thought I'd say that.
Is that like time travel?
It's called cleoquinol, and amyloid plaque is a long chain amyloid plaque molecule, lays along the dendrite. There's 2 neurons, and it gets down to within 100 microns of the glial cells that are the insulation, and it makes ammonia on the backside, which eats a hole in the insulation, shorts it out into the interstitial fluid, and there you go, etc. Anyways.
Sure, I'll share a little bit. My name is James. I went to high school with Maria, and that's where I met Lou. And I had a friend who, for 10 years, he did kidney dialysis on his own at his house. and he's lived all over too. He lived up in Washington, Colorado. He's a real traveler. Lots of stories, you know. And so Steve and I, you know, I kind of took Steve in because that where he was living in Sebastopol, his well, you know, his friend, girlfriend, housemate was kind of, you know, I mean, after 10 years of him being on dialysis and not getting a kidney, she was kind of, you know, done with supporting that. So, you know, I was his friend, and I started going with him to the doctor and everything. So he finally got a kidney and stuff, and then he had to move out of there. And he's talking about this guy, Huevos Rancheros, you know, and
That's his dog.
yeah, so
He referred to himself that way too.
yeah, and you know, it's like I'm not really a big on Facebook or anything like that, but you know, a lot of people communicate through Facebook and stuff, and he's talking about this Huevos Rancheros guy, and then he says, well, do you know where the Blue Spruce is? And I say, oh yeah, I know where the Blue Spruce is. It's a nice place. And so we go over there one day because Lou had offered that Steve could stay on his couch, you know, and I thought that was a pretty kind act, you know, to offer someone that he doesn't even know that from Facebook and stuff. But they communicated, so I heard all kinds of stuff about this Huevos Rancheros, and then we go there. I say, that's Maria's friend Lou, you know.
All the connections.
Yeah, it is. It is a small world.
That made too.
You know, and when I met him, I was like, man, this guy he's a pretty smart guy. He's you know, had some travels and he's got some stuff to say. And Steve was like that too. You know, sometimes we'd pull up at a store. We'd be going from one job to another, and we'd pull up at a store, and then Steve would start telling me a story. But I never got like, you know, we got to get to this job, Steve. You know, because I always wanted to listen to the story and stuff. You know, and so, you know, I mean, is pretty cool.
And anything from you?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, Steve passed away last. You know, your immune system gets compromised, and I took him to the hospital last May, and he passed away. He wound up, you know, it was pretty. It was rough, you know. Yeah.
You've made your
So.
Or do you want to say?
Well, I met Lou. His name was Lou when I met him. But I met him years ago at like the River Club in Guerneville. And he goes, well, anyway, we've talked many stories together. You're the only man that I knew that could almost out-talk me.
Yeah.
and nothing but love.
Yes.
Good man.
That's good. Thank you.
Well, I think John, if we're finished, John is going to read a poem that was read at Stephen's father's funeral, and I think you would like that.
My hand's getting tired.
We thought it was appropriate as well as.
We thought we would like it.
Almost 19 years ago.
Gosh.
Bill's been gone that long?
1999.
October 99.
Oh, Uncle.
Okay, the title of the poem is I'm Free. Don't grieve for me, for now I'm free. I'm following the path God laid for me. I took his hand when I heard him call. I turned my back and left it all. I could not stay another day to laugh, to love, to work, or play. Tasks undone must stay that way. I found that peace at close of day. If my parting has left a void, then fill it with remembered joy. A friendship shared, a laugh, a kiss. Ah yes, these things I too will miss. Be not burdened with times of sorrow. I wish you the sunshine of tomorrow. My life's been full. I've savored much. Good friends, good times, a loved one's touch. Perhaps my time seemed all too brief. Don't lengthen it now with undue grief. Lift up your hearts and share with me. God wanted me now. He set me free.
Amen.
Amen.
And Maria, we'll make sure you take your picture.
No, that's Laura's.
Everybody here knows where to go.
you people all know where to go. We need to find out for sure.
Thank you again for
Yes,
going
yeah,
to trouble and
Oh, no.
coming to our house.
Thank you so much for coming.
Please feel free to stay in touch.
Thank you.
And
God bless.
Set up as needed.
Thank you so
and the
much.
flowers,
They were hers. From her garden. Oh.
but our flowers, I say
Oh, yes, that's what I was.
And Lou, thanks you all for coming.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. And okay. I was going to
Thank
grab
you so
the,
much for the information too to get in touch with Lana's family.
Oh yes,
You're the one.
he's the one.
Oh,
Yes, yes.
I wrote it down.
we may need
No,
to
well, no,
spell
that
this.
was you write down whatever you have for me. Just write it. Here, you want to?